Hey guys, welcome back to Maxie's Kitchen. If this is your first time joining us here, I'm so glad to have you over. Today we're going to be making one of my favorites, okra soup. And for this recipe, I only used meat. This soup was so drawy and I can't wait to teach you how to make it. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. So here's a list of all the ingredients I used for my okra soup today. If you don't want to use the kind of meats that I use, please feel free to use what you want. Okay, now I used some tribe. I also used some salted beef, which is known as tolo beefy, and some mutton as well. You can use goat meat, you can use whatever you want. I also used some kotojre, which is cow food. Now the first thing we're going to do is to steam our meat. So we're going to blend our natural spices for that. I'm going to blend 3/4 of the onions I've chopped, 3/4 of the ginger I've chopped, and 3/4 of the garlic I've peeled. So I put 3/4 of all of those three into the blender cup. And I'm also going to add about 2 sprigs of thyme. So I'm going to take the thyme off their sprigs, put it in the blender, and add the cloves. If you don't have cloves, that's optional. If you don't have time to, you don't have to use it. Please add a bit of water to help with the blending and blend until it's smooth. So I transferred all of my meat into a pot apart from the cow foot. I cooked that in a separate pot and I just added in 3/4 of everything I blended because we used the quarter left for the cow foot. And I'm seasoning my meats. I used salt and complete seasoning by Badia. If you want to buy some, I've left a link. There's a link to that particular one on my Amazon storefront, so you can check that out. Now we're not going to add water, we're just going to cover it and let it cook for some time before we add the water. This will help the flavors get into the meat more. But for this one, I just added in the rest of the quarter, added in the same spices I used for the mutton and the rest, and I added in the water straight ahead and then just covered it to cook. It took about 1 hour 30 minutes for it to get very soft because I like it very soft. So now that our meat is steaming, this is a perfect time to work on the okra. So I'm just chopping 3/4 of all the okra I'm going to use into chunky bits like this. Now you can just chop half of everything you use like this, and the half left you want to grate it. Now if you want your okra to be very slimy, slimier than what I got, grate the half left into a different bowl and add a bit of water and use a fork to beat it, okay? And then add it to the chopped ones. You get very slimy soup. So I just added all the onions, garlic and ginger left from the ones I used for the meat, and I added in the seeds of 2 tomatoes. Now we're going to be chopping 2 tomatoes because we're going to use it for the soup, but make sure you blend the seeds with the onions, garlic and ginger left. So in my pots, I've added my palm oil. We're just going to wait for that to heat up, and then you're going to add your momone or fermented fish. If you're somewhere where you can't find this, please don't worry, but it gives the soup so much flavor, okay? Now I'm going to add my sliced onions once the fish has like melted into the oil, and we're going to give that a good mix and cook that for some time. forgot to say, but when you're blending the second batch of onions, garlic, and ginger, please make sure you add in the scotch bonnet then. That's when you add it to the blender cup to blend with the rest. So after the onions, we added in the blended mixture of natural spices, and now I'm adding in the sliced tomatoes. Now guys, I didn't show you how I sliced them, but I hope you can see from the video. Please use only 2, don't use more than 2, and make sure you take the seeds out. Like I did, I blended the seeds with the natural ingredients, so take the seeds out and then slice the tomatoes and add them. So I cooked that for a while. You guys can see that everything is coming together nicely, so you just want to cook it on about medium to low heat. Let it cook nice and slowly, and then we would add in our meat once the meat is soft enough. Now the cow foot wasn't ready at this point, but I added in my mutton and my salted beef, and then I poured all of the stock into the pot. Okay, so now we're going to cover this and let this cook. So after adding your meat and your stock to the stew and mixing that in, you want to taste it so that you know how to season your stew. You can use the same seasonings that we use just to adjust the stew, and then add some salt if you like. Okay, this is the only time we'll be seasoning the stew, so make sure you do everything right. So our cottage or cow feet was finally done, and it was so soft, just how I like it. So I added it in, but I didn't add the stock from the cottage, okay, or else it would have been too watery. So this was just perfect. So I added it in, and we're going to start working on the okra now. Now I need you guys to please pay attention here. Use as much or as little water as you want to cook your okra, depending on how watery or how thick you want it. So I really wanted a very soupy texture. I wanted it to be really runny and soupy, so that's why I used this much water. But if you don't want it to be too soupy, if you don't want it to be too thin, please use just small water, okay? Another key thing, once you add your baking soda to the water that you're cooking your okra in, let it boil for about 5 minutes before you add the okra in to cook, okay? It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes for the okra to be done cooking and become slimy. So moving on to the stew base, I just added in my spinach and I'm mixing that in. I use spinach because I do not have ademe or jute leaves where I am. If you're in Ghana, you can easily find that, so please add that to the stew base and mix that in. Now please don't be tempted to add any salt to the okra, okay, or else it's going to reduce the sliminess of it. That's why I said that the only time we'll be seasoning it was when we seasoned the stew. Anyway, so I poured my okra into my stew base and I mixed everything together. This was so satisfying to do, and oh my goodness, the soup looked so good at this stage. You guys can tell that it's very watery, it's very slimy as well. If you don't want it to be this like runny, you can always reduce the water that you use to cook the okra, like I said. But this was so delicious, I even want to eat it now. So that's it. All I had to do now was to add some green pepper, some green papushito, okay, just for like flavor at the end. And I just cooked this on like low heat for a few minutes, and that was it. So you can serve this with your favorite swallow. You have this with eba, you can have it with banku, or anything else that you want. Guys, someone told me that they love okro and rice. Please tell me what you think about that. I personally think that that's a very, very weird combo, but let me know what you think. Anyways, I can't wait for you guys to try this recipe. Please let me know if you want another okra recipe, maybe okra stew next time, and comment down below. Subscribe to the channel, guys, for more videos. I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.